Many of you may be familiar with Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's classic work, The Little Prince. The narrator, like the author, is a pilot who crash lands his plane in the middle of the Sahara Desert, miles from civilization. The pilot assumes he will only survive as long as he has water, 8 days. One morning, he's awakened by a strange voice that says, "Draw me a sheep." When he sees that the speaker is an extraordinary young prince, he stares in disbelief. The pilot asks the boy where he came from, but the prince repeats, "Please, draw me a sheep." The pilot complies, but like me, he's not very good at drawing, and his first sheep looks too sickly. The prince asks for another. The second sheep has horns, so the prince specifies that he wants a sheep, not a ram. The pilot draws a third, but this one looks too old. Finally, in some frustration, the pilot draws a box with 3 holes in the side and says, "The sheep you want is inside." To his surprise, the young prince says, "That's just the kind I wanted." And this first whimsical encounter with the little prince is one of many in a journey that takes the pilot and the reader from contentment in the familiar to the exhilaration of an adventure. Many of the disciples have notable and similarly whimsical first encounters with Jesus, but none of them more than Nathanael in today's gospel. Nathanael is minding his own business when Philip runs up to him shouting that he has found the one Moses and the prophets wrote about, and he is from Nazareth, of all places. "Nazareth?" Nathanael repeats. "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip simply invites him, "Come and see for yourself." So Nathanael follows, and before he can shake hands with the stranger from the dusty backwater, Jesus raises his arms and exclaims, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Very different from the first Israelite, Jacob, who deceived his father Isaac and his brother Esau. "How do you know me?" Nathanael asks. Jesus responds, "I saw you under the fig tree even before Philip told you about me." And to our surprise, Nathanael declares, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." In a single moment, Nathanael moves from his narrow contentment in the familiar to embracing the joy that is possible in an adventure following Jesus. But what is it about this unusual encounter that makes Nathanael change his tune so dramatically? The fig tree was a common symbol in Jesus' time for the protection of God. Fig trees produce fruit along with leaves. You'll remember an instance in Mark and in Matthew where Jesus comes upon a fig tree full of leaves. He goes to pick some fruit and finds that there's none to be picked. Whatever pollination necessary for fruit to be produced had not happened. The same seems to be true of the religious institution of Jesus' day. There is no fruit. Jesus knew that Nathanael shared this understanding of those religious institutions and knew that Nathanael would be familiar with the fig tree metaphor. Nathanael knew that the fig tree he was under needed some pruning. And in a few words, Jesus promised a whole series of new possibilities. Nathanael is blown away, but the excitement does not stop. Jesus asks Nathanael, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." You will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. What do you suppose that might look like? If you had to draw that scene, what would it look like? Jesus is alluding to Jacob, who was called Israel after his wrestling match with God. Like the metaphor of the fig tree, Nathanael would have immediately understood the connection to Jacob, who is said to have dreamt of a ladder reaching to heaven with God at the top. On the ladder, there are angels ascending and descending between earth and heaven. Knowing this story, Nathanael would have understood Jesus to be saying that he would be the one to re-establish the joyful relationship between God and his people. Jesus would make it so that no person or institution could get in the way of God doing what God is going to do to bring about this reconciliation between himself and his creation. Jesus invited Nathanael on a journey that would take him all around the region and eventually to Jerusalem to confront the powers of the day. There was no hour-by-hour itinerary, but there was a promise of joy and hope in helping to usher in a world that could be God's kingdom come. Similarly, Jesus does not offer us much information about what following him will look like. Not unlike Saint-Exupéry's Pilate depicting a sheep by drawing a box with holes on the side, Jesus promises us an adventure and a chance to imagine together what following him might look like. We will define what turns our journeys take, but we can only do that once we accept Philip's curious, whimsical invitation, the invitation to come and see.